Hello, I'm Andrew Suskind, and I'm a psychotherapist and author based in West Los Angeles since 1992, specializing in trauma and addictions. Welcome to our podcast, which I call It's Not About the Sex, also the title of my recent book. Here we focus on all topics related to compulsive sexual behavior, often referred to as sex addiction. In particular, we explore ways to build long-term, sustainable recovery while establishing more meaningful connection and greater intimacy. Our intention is to offer fresh viewpoints, brand new perspectives, and practical user-friendly tools toward living a more deeply connected life. Let's get started. Today, my guest is Terra Holbrook, who is an experienced speaker who focuses on trauma, codependency, addictions, and the effects of early childhood toxic stress. She founded Sea-Glass Intensives and Consulting, where she works with individuals and couples in 3-day intensives as well as offering workshops. Terra also facilitates first responder workshops as well. For many years, she facilitated the professionals program at the Bridge to Recovery and has worked as clinical director in various treatment centers throughout the country. Terra is a licensed clinical social worker and has been working in the mental health field since 1993. She has spoken at numerous conferences, been featured on NPR and the TV show Intervention, written for Counselor Magazine, and has been featured on local TV and radio. On a personal note, I want to share that I worked with Terra up at the Bridge to Recovery here in Santa Barbara. And not only is Terra an incredibly talented clinician, but she's a very intuitive, warm, and genuine person who brings very special talents to her work with everybody who she touches. Welcome, Terra. I'm so glad you could join us today. And today you are going to be talking about a really significant topic that we haven't talked about on our podcast here before. And I'm really excited to do that. The topic is this: using polyvagal theory and internal family systems work for healing intimacy wounds. And that's a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts. So we're going to get right into it and talk about what all of that really means. So I'm wondering if you can start off and summarize what polyvagal theory really means to you.
I will. Thank you for having me, Andrew. It's so good to spend time with you today.
Of course.
So polyvagal theory is really the idea that our autonomic nervous system is always searching for cues of safety and danger and life threat. And it's searching for those cues in our body, in the world around us, and in our connections. And this is way below the realm of consciousness. And really, the idea of polyvagal theory is, how do we use our surroundings, our body, our connections to help us self-regulate and reach for safety in our lives? And so, there's all the idea of the vagus nerve and how there's a ventral vagal pathway and a dorsal vagal pathway, and then the sympathetic nervous system takes over. And there, all these integral parts. But really, if we're trying to break it down, the ventral vagus pathway is the pathway that creates safety and connection for us. And if it were a ladder, which always it goes down the ladder into fight, flight, freeze, mobilize, getting ready for that danger or threat. That's like going down the ladder. If we move out of that safe connected, we move into this place that's waiting for action. And then below that is an immobilized. The dorsal vagal is really an immobilized state. And so for what we're talking about today, it's just the idea that our body is always responding to cues for safety or danger or life threat, and that our system just moves up and down this ladder from ventral vagal to sympathetic to dorsal vagal, then back up to the fight or flight, and then back to connection. And we do this many times a day. We go up and down this ladder many times a day, and we don't even notice. We don't even notice. But if we become connected to this system, we can use this system to help us in our relationships, in our intimacy, moving out of fight or flight and truly moving from this immobilized state that often we find ourselves and really pulling towards this safe, connected place, which is that ventral vagal pathway that will help us reach for connection, intimacy, and really self-regulation. And so the polyvagal theory gives us more insight into how we can get in touch with our bodies and how we can reach for connection for well-being.
For well-being, that's so significant. And I really want to also mention that polyvagal theory is relatively new in terms of the theories that are out there around the nervous system and psychology. And can you say something about how that seemed to have evolved? Because I think it's important for our listeners to understand how cutting edge this really is.
Right. So Stephen Porges really founded this work in 1984 as he kind of ran into it by accident and really began to look at how this, how the autonomic nervous system ties into our response. And over the years, he's talked about it. I remember quite a few years ago going to a trauma conference and him talking about it, and it just really hadn't caught on. I think it was catching on, but I think as we've really moved into understanding trauma, and trauma connected not with these big T events or these acute trauma incidences, but really understanding childhood trauma and developmental trauma, and looking at trauma over a lifetime. If we can go back to that co-regulation between our mother and ourselves or our primary caregiver, and look at the patterns that was set in our autonomic nervous system from the very beginning, we can begin to understand how we connect, how our bodies have been programmed over a lifetime of cues and clues for safety, what we're reaching out to and what feels normal for us. And if we've been traumatized, how is the system activated in ways that feel like it's set in this sympathetic nervous pathway where we're mobilized for action rather than for connection, or even in an immobilized state where we really feel hopeless or numb. When we get down there, we don't have any energy, and oftentimes we're stuck in those places from emotional pain, from mental pain, from lack of connection. And using the awareness of all this as it's come to light with trauma, I think is how it's really evolved, especially in the last few years as it's really come to the forefront.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that from your perspective, polyvagal theory is primarily about safety and connection in the sense of how do we have relationships and intimacy that really are working best for us, and how it contributes to our well-being. But that there's something about understanding, I love what you said, the cues and the clues, to how that really works inside of each of us. And so the awareness is so key, right?
Absolutely. The awareness is key, and beginning to understand how can I use this realm of unconsciousness to understand where I'm at, how I get caught up in this fight flight, whether it's historical or whether it's survival, feels like survival now, and how do I reach for connection to pull me into a safer place? How do I reach for social connection? How do I pull myself out of this state? Or especially if I've been in the shutdown mode, how do I use then the adrenaline to move me to action and then back up to this connected state, and beginning to be aware I have the ability to change some of these automated states that are in my nervous system. I can work with them and change the way I feel and the way I react and survive in many ways. Sure.
So what really fascinates me about your work is that you really pair polyvagal theory and internal family systems, sometimes called parts work. And so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about internal family systems work and how that seems to pair up with polyvagal theory.
Okay, I'd be glad to do that. So internal family systems work, obviously, I think most people know, is the idea that we all are made of many parts, and that these parts formed probably in times of stress many years ago, and that these parts have developed and oftentimes become how we react, how we behave, rather than acting out of our true self that kind of is pushed to the backstage because all these parts are big. You know, there's their idea of these parts are, we have managers that actually form almost like a personality when inside of us. And those parts take over. Those parts take over in a way that masks who we truly are at our core self, because the system is threatened. And so the idea of these managers coming out and running the show are because the idea of the pain, the pools of pain that are underneath are really exiles.
Mm.
And the protectors come out so that the exiles will stay down in the basement, if you will, won't come out and flood the whole system. And so protectors come out, whether that's, you know, controlling parts of us or anger parts of us or have to do everything right parts of us or not enough parts. They play roles to keep those exiles at bay so that the system isn't flooded with pain.
Mm-hmm.
And when those managers don't work well enough, oftentimes what's called a firefighter will come in and flood the system to reset so that the managers can begin to do their job. Because if those exiles get out and the pain is up, oftentimes the firefighters will come in. And that would be something like addiction, binging, rageful anger,
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of things that really do reset the whole system.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my work, as I'm working with people in parts work, you know, so much is that our parts take us again out of connection. They're protectors. So they protect us from not only the pain, but oftentimes they protect us from vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
They protect us from connection because that feels unsafe. That feels perhaps like a threat. And so, you know, in working with these parts, we don't try to get rid of these parts. These parts have done such amazing help and work for us in ways at times when we needed protection. And these parts are now overworked and have taken over. And so the idea of parts work is going inside, actually talking to these parts, making connections with these parts and understanding how they were formed and how they feel and how we feel about them, and learning to appreciate their role, but also being very aware that they're overworked.
Mm-hmm.
They never want to say that they're overworked,
Mm-hmm.
but we have so much compassion for them and curiosity and understanding, and we can go in there and partner with them to say, you know, I don't want you to go. I just want to prove to you that my true self can show up and you can take a break. And then when I need you, or those times when I need extra help, you're right there with me and we're working together.
Mm.
And so again, it's using these parts as a system of awareness inside of us, not fighting against it, but becoming aware of a whole system that lives inside of us to again move into our best self, which is safe, connected, with social engagement and love, intimacy. And so what I do with polyvagal theory and IFS work, parts work, is that I begin to help somebody begin to understand how their system works in very different ways.
Mm-hmm.
One from a system that was formed from the pain, and the other that is really an autonomic nervous system response. And we begin to kind of overlay what it feels like to be in true self in that ventral vagal state with this connectedness and the safety. And what happens when we get in that sympathetic state of fight, flight, immobilization, and what parts come out at that time. And then how do the flooding, which really the dorsal vagus shutdown really is often those firefighter parts that immobilize us and help us feel or cause us to feel hopeless. And then moving up the system to really make peace with those controlling parts or those managing parts, so that we can move back into that ventral vagal state of safety and connectedness, which really is our true self.
Sure. It sounds so respectful, because what I hear you saying, and I've heard this before, is that all parts are welcome.
All parts are welcome,
right?
Yes.
And yet we want them to work together, not somehow against one another, but how can they really work for us rather than against us? And I hear that it really is an artful approach to.
It really is.
Yeah.
And when you are able to connect with these parts, they are brilliant in ways that they've protected and helped, and what they've done, and what their purpose is, and the ways that they've protected us. I mean, it's loving and kind. But when you ask a part, how old do you think that person is? They think they're young, and that they've had to really come in and protect. And that's one of the most fascinating parts, is to listen to a part be able to respond in what age they think you are as you're doing that work. But that compassion for those parts, and it's not, to me, in the work I do, it's not really a developed compassion. It is just a pure compassion. When you start talking to that part and joining with that part, it's a beautiful process.
I know it's different, but it has a flavor of inner child work.
It has a flavor of inner child work. And sometimes I do inner child work, because I think that ties in, as you say, as well. And whether that inner child work is a part, or whether that inner child work is the exiles, whatever that might be, in whatever construct. I don't tell people tell me what the construct is. But it really does fit within that system. And it also, if we lay attachment on this as well, and I won't go into that today, but laying attachment work, has a beautiful role in this work as well, and really understanding those safe attachments, the anxious attachment, the avoidant attachment, and these roles, even in that, if we take a look or kind of lay them on this autonomic nervous system, and the way that it moves, I mean, they all fit beautifully together.
For sure. So Terra, you use the term intimacy wounds, and I'm wondering if you can tell us more about what that means.
I think intimacy wounds are when we really want to be connected to another person, a sense of belonging. But something has happened in our past, in our lives, or is continuing to happen, that those intimate relationships hurt. They're painful. And so we reach out for intimacy, and for whatever reason, whether we can't or our partner can't, we end up hurting each other in the quest for connection. And then that makes us pull back and feel like we're in threat. It makes us pull back and not trust. It makes us desire for more and feel almost more lonely, because perhaps this person is right here, but we don't know how to break through the pain, the mistrust, the hurt, the damage that's been done. And so intimacy wounds, to me, are that tragic part of, I so badly want to connect with you, but it just feels like pain, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. So this is really sacred work, in other words.
It's very sacred work. It's very sacred work, yeah.
And I know we're talking about models of working with clients and theoretical models, but I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about how these particular models are different from talk therapy, including things like cognitive behavioral therapy? What's
Hmm.
different?
You know, when we're using talk therapy, we're recognizing patterns. We see the pattern, we see how it affects us. We try and search in our brains for a way to change it. And we're using our mind to do that. But I often tell my clients who come in and say, but I've already worked on this. And I'll say, how did you work on it? And they'll say, well, I've been in therapy for a long time and we've talked all about this. And my famous quote is, um, recognition is not healing.
Mm,
And to me, going in and understanding the way the body responds and works and the way that our subconscious is formed around these different parts really is much more experiential when we can get in touch with our body and feel. Last night I was in a group and we sat across from each other and we looked in each other's eyes and had, a very angry kind of face, and we listened to what happened in the body and what that felt like, and then just kind of a flat affect,
hmm
and then this really warm kind of smile, and you pay attention to what's happening in your body. There's something that shifts in your mind about knowing what's happening in your body, not just saying it, but knowing what's happening. And when you get these parts in you that live within you and you start having conversations with them, there's a shift in the way that our body feels to us. We're connected to it. And in those ways, this is healing work. It's not just thinking about it and
hmm
trying to think about, okay, what did my therapist say here? And what am I supposed to say differently? And what am I supposed to do? It's a
hmm
definite feeling in the body that feels different that lends to that healing.
hmm
And so anytime I can do experiential work, anytime I can get the body moving, anytime I can bring awareness to consciousness about how I'm organized in my body through my trauma response and helping clients do that. I'm that to me feels much more effective, much more deep and sacred and healing than just talking about it.
hmm So, just out of curiosity, Tara, was that something that you learned in grad school, or did you happen to integrate the body and somatic work at some particular point in your career?
I hear these concepts and then it just starts making sense to me.
hmm
I've never heard anybody talk about this. As far as, of course, I've heard, internal family systems and polyvagal, but I've not heard anybody talk about this together. But it just makes sense to me. So
hmm
when I'm teaching, when I'm in a group, when I'm with clients, it's it's just the idea of course, and there, if I put attachment on top of this, they just all work together,
hmm
and so it just makes sense to me. So, it's nothing that I've really learned. It's something I put together on my own that just makes sense and it makes sense to my clients. And so I use it because it's impactful in the
hmm
ways that they see themselves and change and feeling inside and movement inside away from um, trauma responses and into connection.
hmm So, along those lines, what are the longer term goals, or what are the longer term healing directions that you see with clients working within these therapies?
Mm. So, the goals really are that with my parts, I make peace with them, that I become my true self begins to be the trusted leader of my internal family,
Mm,
that I can regulate in every aspect of my life, no matter what life brings, that I can stay connected to myself, that I can move to this ventral vagal pathway for safety, even even when my body's telling me I'm under threat, even when my firefighters want to come out and just um, desecrate the whole system, just reset the whole system, that I can hang on, that I can pull in my managers and we can have a conference, and that my true self will shine through, the self that I was made to be, and that I can stay in a state of calmness, connectedness, no matter what happens. And when we can do that, our trauma history is still a memory. It still can, give us those cues that we're not safe, but we can manage through those cues. We can regulate through those cues to really find a place of safety, find a place of connected to myself, connected to a spiritual place, and a sense that everything's okay, even in the midst of everything not being okay. And as I've learned and have watched myself do that more and more and more, it's like, this is a secret to life. Like, this is, we think, oh, I want to get through, I want to heal from this trauma. I want to be done with it. And I'm thinking, done with it just means that I have this memory and that I can appreciate and make meaning for it. But that my regulation, that I can regulate through whatever life's going to bring, because I have no control over any of that. But if I can work with my body and be able to bring myself to safety, man, I'm all in.
Right. That touchstone of safety is the gold standard. Yeah. So do you have to find a therapist who does this particular kind of therapy to use this framework?
IFS work, I think it's really great to find an IFS therapist because, recognizing your parts, understanding, knowing how to talk to them, understanding when they're activated, the unburdening of those exiles is real sacred work as well. I think you can begin to figure out, what are my parts? What are my managers? Who are these managers? I think you can do some initial work. I think with the polyvagal theory, I think you can really go in and study that. There's polyvagal exercises on YouTube. So you can really begin to understand your own system if you have a desire to understand that. I think it's nice to understand and work with a therapist so that there's a person to co-regulate with you to help you understand and see. I think that's a really beautiful part of therapy, is this co-regulation. It's a big part of polyvagal theory. So I think for especially with polyvagal, having that co-regulation and these positive relationships help you understand what it feels like to be safe and connected. But I think there's a lot of work that you can do on your own to understand when you're in fight or flight, or even in the shutdown. With IFS, I think it's probably a little different. Again, I think that you can begin the initial work in understanding what some of your parts are by the ones that obviously are very manifested. But to really understand them, I think it takes a therapist to help understand how that inner family is organized, and to begin to really understand, how do I join with them and have compassion and love and have a place for all of us, as all parts are welcome, ongoing.
And I just want to share that the particular blend of theories and clinical expertise that you bring to your clients is exceptional. That to bring polyvagal theory, internal family systems, inner child work, attachment theory, and with a spiritual base is truly exceptional. So when someone who's listening to this podcast is looking for professional support, if you could find a clone of Terra Holbrook, you're doing pretty well. But if you can find as much of that as possible, that also would be helpful.
Thank you, Andrew.
Oh, of course. So what do you love most about doing this work?
I have the opportunity to step in such sacred places that often most people never even get to step into. And I feel so honored to be able to do that. And that's what I love about this work. It's an honor. I love it because I get to help people, but it's such an honor to step in those sacred places. And I'm always in awe that I get to do this work. And that's what I love about it, is that I have this opportunity to do that. And really it's my heart, it's my love. It really is.
We've used the word sacred a few times, and I because I know you, Terra, I have a very good sense of what that means to you. But I'm wondering if we can just break that down a little bit in terms of what your experience is in the room with your clients who are brave enough to do this kind of work. What does sacred mean to you?
You know, I think from my own experience of trauma, that is connected to my spirituality. And that may not be true for everybody, but that's true for me. And when I think about the trauma that I went through and the way that it shaped me, and the way that that the pain was so great, but the understanding of healing and getting to that part, and then being able to um, work with others who feel that pain or feel stuck. It's a very honoring process to
Mm-hmm.
be in somebody's deep pain that feels shameful and painful, and I don't want anybody to see it, and what does this say about me? And when somebody allows you to see those parts that feel so horrible and shameful, and they trust you that much that you're going to hold the space for them to say, can you see how awful this is, or how horrified I am about this, and you can hold that for them. I don't know what else sacred is besides that moment of knowing that somebody trusts you with that much pain and heartache and heartbrokenness, and that you can hold that space for them and love them, like join with them and love them no matter what, no matter how shameful, painful, no matter what happened. And sometimes, it's brought on by actions of themselves. Sometimes, most of the time, it's other people's actions, but it doesn't matter, because you go past judgment and you just understand. You just understand, and in their process, it always makes sense. And that's when you know you're in the sacred, is because you can make sense out of
Mm-hmm.
whatever has happened,
Mm-hmm.
and you love them for hanging in there and wanting to to be to heal,
Mm-hmm.
to make a better life for themselves.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just share where I am at this moment. My heart is very, very warm at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And my body is a little tingly because I have seen you work and been a recipient of your work. And so I know the sacredness
Mm-hmm.
of what you bring, and I'm just so grateful on so many levels. And I have one last question I would like to share with you. So, if there were any takeaways that you would like our listening audience to really make portable, what would be most important about today's podcast that you would hope could be taken with them wherever they go?
So the takeaway from the work that I do, from the things I've talked about, and really from my heart, is that people are so busy trying to find the answers outside of themselves. So they reach for things that numb, they reach for their devices, they reach for a substance that will numb, they reach for TV to binge, they reach for anything to take them outside of themselves. And sometimes that's even therapy. If I can just talk about it, if I can just process it. And that's great. But what I really want them to know is that the answers lie within themselves. And that if they can begin to understand that entering into the pain, the place where they think the pain is, which is inside, is not as scary as they think once they're there, but that's where the answers lie. And that's the difficult part, is if I go inward, it's going to spill out all over. But the truth is, if I go inward, I'm going to heal. And so most of the time we can't do that on our own, although we can go inward to breathe and meditate and begin to learn to settle ourselves down. But it's finding some trusted other, a therapist, that will take us into ourselves and really begin to help us heal by using our own strength, our own family's system that's inside of us, our own autonomic nervous system, our own understanding of how attachment has influenced the way that we love, the way that we reach each other, the way that we bond with each other. And that all of that lies within us, not without, not on the outside.
I still have a very warm heart, I want you to know, Terra, and still tingling a little bit over here. And I just want to say, and I don't use this word lightly,
No.
it was truly a joy to share the time with you this morning and to get to know a little bit more about what you're currently working on with your clients. I've had a good sense of it through the years, but this is super
Mm-hmm.
exciting stuff. And I want our listeners to know that this is really exceptional,
Yeah.
cutting edge work that puts together a beautiful hybrid of not only clinical understanding and theories, et cetera, but application to really helping folks find their true selves and the core of their essence. And I think what you do, Tara, is fantastic. I've always thought that, but it's getting even more fantastic all the time.
Thank you.
And and I'm sure we'll be crossing paths again, hopefully sometime soon. And absolutely. So
Absolutely.
thank you again so much for being
Hopefully.
here today.
Yeah. Thank Thank you for having me, Andrew. It's been
All
a
right. Take
pleasure.
good
I
care.
always love spending time with you.
Uh-huh. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening today. It was so terrific sharing the time with my super talented, intuitive colleague and friend, Terra Holbrook, and discussing these really significant topics that affect those affected by compulsive sexual behavior. Terra can be reached through her website at terraholbrook.com. I'll spell that for you, TerraHolbrook.com. And be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, or please share our podcast on Spotify. And if there are any topics you'd like us to discuss in the future, or you have some guests that you would like to hear from, please let us know. I look forward to you joining us on future podcasts, and thanks again for being with us today.